What if everything you were taught about reality was only the surface of a far deeper truth? What if beneath the world you can see, touch, and measure, there flows an invisible current of order, silent, patient, and endless, shaping the rise of stars, the turning of seasons, the beating of your own heart, and even the quiet direction of your destiny? For thousands of years, the wisest minds of humanity believed the cosmos was governed by invisible laws that no telescope could photograph and no equation could fully contain. And one man, manly P.Hall, devoted his life to recovering them. This is the journey into the forgotten architecture of existence itself. Long before our modern age of science and certainty, nearly every ancient civilization looked up at the heavens and sensed something extraordinary. They believed the universe was not a machine of blind chance, but a living ordained intelligence expressed through nature, through numbers, through consciousness, through destiny itself. The Egyptians carved this belief into stone. The Greeks debated it in their academies. The sages of India, Persia, and Babylon wove it into their myths and their mathematics. To them, reality was a temple, and every star, every ratio, every symbol was a hidden inscription upon its walls. They believed that hidden laws govern not only the movement of planets but the evolution of the soul. And here lies the strange and unsettling paradox at the very heart of our story. If these laws truly exist, if invisible principles shape every human life, every choice, every rise and fall, then why are we never taught them in school? Why do we spend 12 years, sometimes 20, learning to measure the surface of the world, and yet almost none of that time learning to perceive its depth? We are taught the names of the planets, but not the ancient conviction that the heavens and the human being mirror one another. We are taught the formulas of geometry, but not the belief that geometry is a sacred language written into the fabric of creation. So perhaps the greatest mystery is not whether hidden laws exist. Perhaps the greatest mystery is whether we have spent our entire lives ignoring them, walking past a truth so vast, so obvious, and so quiet that we simply lost the ability to see it. Imagine that. Imagine standing inside a cathedral of meaning your whole life and never once looking up. This is not a question of belief. It is a question of perception. And once you begin to suspect that reality has a hidden structure, you can never quite look at the world the same way again. Into this vast and forgotten territory steps our guide, manly P.Hall. He was not born into privilege, nor trained in the great universities of his time. He was, in the truest sense, a self-taught seeker. As a young man, he began to notice something that most people overlook. Scattered across the ancient world in the temples of Egypt, the philosophies of Greece, the symbols of the mystery schools, the sacred diagrams of the Kabbalah, and the writings attributed to Hermes, there seemed to be echoes of a single unified wisdom. Fragments of the same forgotten truth, repeated across cultures separated by oceans and centuries, as if they had all once drunk from the same hidden spring. And Hall asked a question that would define the rest of his life. What if all of these fragments were pieces of one great teaching that humanity had slowly forgotten? So he made it his mission to gather them. He read tirelessly. He collected rare manuscripts. He studied symbols, myths, and sacred geometries that most of the modern world had dismissed as mere superstition. And in 1928, still a remarkably young man, he compiled his findings into a monumental work, an encyclopedia of the world's hidden wisdom that would influence seekers for generations. He was not merely writing history. He was attempting something far bolder. He was trying to reassemble the lost architecture of a universal philosophy he believed could reveal the very laws by which reality operates. And before we go any further into this extraordinary journey, I want to speak to you directly. If you are fascinated by ancient wisdom, sacred geometry, Hermetic philosophy, hidden symbols, the study of consciousness, and the timeless teachings of manly P.Hall, subscribe to the channel now. Every episode here is carefully researched from trusted historical, philosophical, and esoteric sources so that together we can uncover the deeper principles that may quietly govern the whole of reality. This is a journey best taken with company, so come with us and let curiosity lead the way. Because make no mistake, what we are about to explore is not merely a history lesson. It is not a dry recital of old names and forgotten dates. This is a rediscovery, a remembering. We are going to trace the outline of principles that may quietly govern not only the distant cosmos, but the intimate landscape of your own inner life. The way you think, the way you create, the way meaning rises and falls within you. Hall believed that the same laws which shape the orbit of a planet also shape the growth of the human soul, and that to understand one is to begin to understand the other. There is something deeply moving in that idea. It suggests that you are not a stranger wandering through an indifferent universe. It suggests that you are woven from the same threads as the stars, subject to the same harmonies, capable of reflecting the same hidden order within your own awareness. To the ancients, this was not a comforting fantasy. It was the highest form of knowledge, a knowledge that could transform not just what you understand, but who you become. And so we stand at the threshold. Ahead of us lies a forgotten world of Egyptian priests and Greek philosophers, of mystery schools and sacred numbers, of symbols that concealed as much as they revealed. Ahead lies the slow disappearance of this wisdom through the burning of libraries and the silencing of the ancient schools. and ahead lies the quiet, patient figure of a man who refused to let that wisdom vanish entirely. But before we can understand these hidden laws, we must first understand the man who believed the universe was never random at all. His name was Manly Palmer Hall, and by every ordinary measure, he should never have become one of the most influential keepers of ancient wisdom in the modern age. He held no university degree. He belonged to no established academy. He was, in the truest sense, self-taught, a young man who wandered into the great libraries of the world with nothing but an insatiable hunger to understand why the ancients spoke of the cosmos with such reverence and such certainty. Where others saw dusty myths and forgotten superstitions, Hall saw something else entirely. He saw fragments, scattered pieces of a single vast luminous idea that had once been wholly an idea broken apart by time, by conquest, by the slow erosion of memory, and left waiting in the margins of history for someone patient enough to gather it again. And so he devoted his life to that gathering. He read across cultures and centuries, tracing the same symbols from Egyptian temples to Greek academies, from Hermetic scrolls to the quiet geometry hidden within cathedrals. He came to believe that beneath all these traditions ran a single golden thread of universal law. To follow that thread, we must walk beside him now, back into the world that first shaped his extraordinary vision. At the very center of everything Manly P.Hall taught lies a single, quiet conviction known so simple to state, and yet so vast in its implications that it has the power to reorganize the way a person sees the world. The universe, he insisted, is not the product of blind chance. It is not a cold accident of matter colliding in the dark, not a meaningless churn of particles that somehow, against all odds, gave rise to minds capable of wondering about their own existence. To Hall, that explanation was not merely incomplete, was a kind of forgetting. Beneath the surface of things, he believed, there moves an ordered intelligence, a hidden architecture in which everything, from the spiral of a seashell to the arc of a human life, participates in a design far greater than itself. Think for a moment about what that claim really means. It means that the equations describing the motion of the planets, the ratios that make a melody beautiful, the patterns that repeat in leaves and rivers and galaxies, the strange logic of dreams, the pull of destiny that seems to guide a life towards something it did not consciously choose, all of these are not separate curiosities. They are expressions of the same underlying order. Mathematics and nature, consciousness and fate, the outer cosmos and the inner soul. Hall saw them as different languages speaking the same eternal truth. Where the modern mind draws hard lines between science and spirit, between the measurable and the sacred, Hall saw an unbroken continuity, a single intelligence writing itself into every level of reality. And here is the part that fascinated him most. This vision was not something he invented. It was not a new philosophy dreamed up in the quiet of his study. It was something he discovered, something that had appeared, again and again, across thousands of years and across civilizations that never spoke to one another. The priests of ancient Egypt knew it. The philosophers of Greece circled around it. The Hermetic sages encoded it. The Kabbalists preserved it in their diagrams of divine emanation. The sages of India expressed it in their meditations on the One behind the many. Wherever human beings had gazed deeply into the nature of existence, they seemed to arrive at the same startling conclusion, that the universe is alive with meaning, and that meaning follows laws, but these laws were rarely spoken aloud. This is one of the great puzzles Hall spent his life unraveling. The wisdom was not written plainly in textbooks or proclaimed in the marketplace. Instead, it was hidden, wrapped inside myths that seemed like mere stories, carved into sacred symbols whose true significance was known only to the initiated, whispered within the walls of mystery schools that demanded years of preparation before revealing their deepest teachings. The knowledge was there, everywhere, hiding in plain sight, but it was veiled deliberately, as though those who possessed it understood that some truths cannot simply be handed over. They must be earned, approached slowly, prepared for. And so the greatest secrets of the ancient world were concealed not to keep them from humanity, but to protect them until humanity was ready. This is the mystery at the heart of our journey, and it opens onto 4 questions that will guide everything that follows. First, what exactly are these hidden laws of the universe? What are the specific principles the ancients believed governed both matter and spirit? Second, how did one man, Manly P.Hall, manage to uncover teachings that had been scattered and half forgotten across so many cultures and centuries? What did he see that others missed? Third, why were these principles considered sacred knowledge, guarded so carefully, revealed so cautiously, spoken of only in symbol and allegory? And finally, the question that matters most to each of us listening now. Can understanding these ancient laws actually change the way we live today? Do they still have something to offer a world that has, in so many ways, forgotten them? To answer these questions, Hall developed a method unlike almost anyone before him. He was not, in the ordinary sense, building a new religion or founding a new doctrine. He claimed no revelation of his own, no private vision that set him above the traditions he studied. What he did instead was far more patient and, in its own way, far more remarkable. He became a kind of gatherer of golden threads. He immersed himself in the Egyptian mysteries and the Greek schools, in Hermetic philosophy and Kabbalistic mysticism, in the spiritual sciences of the East and the symbolic traditions of the West. And as he studied, he began to notice something. The same ideas kept surfacing, wearing different costumes in different lands. The same principles appeared under different names, expressed through different symbols, yet pointing unmistakably toward the same underlying reality. Where a lesser mind might have seen only a confusing tangle of contradictory beliefs, Hall saw harmony. He saw that the Egyptian who spoke of cosmic order, the Greek who searched for the first principle of all things, the Hermeticist who declared as above, so below, and the sage of the East who spoke of the one reality behind all appearances were not disagreeing with one another. They were describing the same mountain from different sides. And so Hall's great work became one of synthesis, not the invention of something new, but the careful reassembly of something ancient and whole, an idea that had once been unified and had been broken apart by the passage of time. He took the scattered fragments and, with extraordinary devotion, began to fit them back together into a single, unified vision of reality. And this brings us to the emotional heart of everything Hall believed, the reason his work continues to move people even now. For beneath all the scholarship, beneath the symbols and the systems and the ancient names, there lies a promise, a quiet, almost tender promise. It is the promise that the chaos we so often feel around us is not the final truth, that behind the apparent randomness of life, behind the confusion and the noise and the seeming meaninglessness of a world that has learned to explain everything and to feel almost nothing, there lies a hidden harmony, an order, a pattern that includes us, that has a place for us, that was never truly lost, only forgotten. This is perhaps the deepest gift Hall offers to the modern soul. We live in what many have called a disenchanted age, a world stripped of wonder, where the stars are only burning gas and the human heart is only chemistry, and the vast machinery of existence grinds on without any particular reason. And to a world like that, Hall whispers something almost heretical in its hopefulness. What if the ancients were right? What if beneath the surface of things there really does move an intelligence, a meaning, a law? What if recovering that ancient vision could restore to us not only knowledge, but something we have quietly been starving for, a sense that our lives matter, that we belong to something luminous and vast? That is the vision Hall spent his life recovering. But to truly grasp what he found, we cannot begin with him. We must go back further still, to the ancient world where these ideas first came alive, where priests and philosophers and dreamers first looked up at the heavens and dared to believe that the cosmos was speaking to them. To understand what Hall recovered, we must now walk into that world ourselves. Imagine for a moment a world utterly unlike our own. Not a world of concrete and glass, of glowing screens and endless noise, but a world in which the sky itself was a sacred text, and every living thing seemed to whisper a secret to those patient enough to listen. Imagine a world where people truly believe that every star wheeling overhead, every number counted on the fingers, every symbol carved into stone, and every rustle of wind through the reeds was the visible trace of an invisible intelligence woven silently through all things. In such a world, nothing was merely accidental. A river did not simply flow, it echoed a cosmic order. A season did not simply turn, it revealed the breathing rhythm of a living universe. To walk through that world was to walk through a temple without walls, where the divine was not distant, but pressed close on every side. Step now into the shadowed halls of ancient Egypt. Picture the temple walls rising in the desert heat, their stone cool and dim within, painted with figures whose eyes seemed to follow you across the centuries. Here, priests moved with slow deliberation, their whole lives given to the study of cosmic harmony. They watched the rising of the star Sirius and knew that the Nile would soon flood, bringing life to the black earth. To them, the heavens and the land were not two separate things but one great pattern, mirrored above and below. These priests were not mere keepers of ritual. They were astronomers, geometers, and philosophers, guardians of a knowledge they believed had been handed down from a golden age. In the silence of those sanctuaries, they traced the movements of the sun and moon, aligned their monuments to the stars, and taught that the soul of a human being was itself a fragment of that same eternal order. Now travel north and west across the wine-dark sea to the sunlit shores of Greece. Here a different spirit stirred, restless, questioning, hungry for understanding. Imagine the Greek philosophers gathered in the shade of olive trees, arguing far into the evening about the nature of reality itself. What is the world made of? Is there a single truth beneath the endless change we see? These were not idle questions to them, but matters of the deepest urgency. Among them walked Pythagoras, that strange and luminous figure, half mathematician and half mystic. Picture him surrounded by his students, drawing shapes in the sand, plucking the strings of a lyre to reveal that the intervals of music obey precise mathematical ratios. From this simple wonder he drew a staggering conclusion: that number itself governs existence, that the entire cosmos is built upon proportion and harmony, and that to understand mathematics is to glimpse the very architecture of the divine. Beyond the philosophers stood the Hermetic sages, heirs to a tradition that fused the wisdom of Egypt with the searching mind of Greece. Imagine them bent over ancient scrolls by lamplight, describing the universe not as a lifeless machine but as one vast, living mind, a single consciousness in which every being participates. To them, the stars were thoughts, the world a dream unfolding within a divine intelligence, and the human soul a spark of that same infinite awareness. They spoke in riddles and images, veiling their teachings so that only the sincere and the prepared could truly grasp them. Above all, they whispered a single world-altering idea, that what exists above is reflected in what exists below, that the great and the small are bound together by an unbreakable thread of correspondence, and there were places, hidden and hushed, where this knowledge was not merely discussed but experienced. Imagine the mystery school secret orders scattered across the ancient world, from Eleusis in Greece to the temple sanctuaries of Egypt. Picture a young initiate led blindfolded through darkened corridors, heart-pounding, uncertain of what awaits. Here, wisdom was not given away in words alone. It was transmitted through ritual, through silence, through carefully guarded symbols whose meanings unfolded only over years of devotion. The initiate would pass through trials meant to shake loose old certainties, to strip away the ordinary self, and to awaken something deeper within. When at last the veil was lifted, it was said, the student did not simply learn a new idithi were reborn, seeing the universe with entirely new eyes. This was knowledge earned, not merely acquired, sacred precisely because it demanded transformation. And everywhere, in every ancient land, there were the astronomers watchers of the night sky who linked the slow procession of the heavens with the destiny of the earth below. Imagine them upon flat rooftops beneath a blaze of stars undimmed by any city light, charting the wandering planets, recording eclipses, believing that the movements above held meaning for the affairs of nations and the lives of men. To them, heaven and earth were not divided. The same intelligence that guided the stars in their courses was thought to move through the seasons, through the tides of human fortune, through the unfolding of every life. Now widen your gaze and behold the vast landscape from which this wisdom flowed. In ancient Egypt, the sacred sciences of geometry and the soul. In Greece, the passion for universal truth and the discovery that number underlies all. In Babylon, the patient astronomers who mapped the heavens with astonishing precision, laying foundations that would endure for millennia. In Persia, the visions of light and darkness, of a cosmos shaped by the eternal struggle and balance of opposing powers. In India, the profound contemplation of consciousness itself, of a single reality underlying all appearances, and of the soul's long journey through many lives. From Hermetic Egypt came the teaching of the living universe and the law of correspondence. From the Kabbalah of the Hebrew mystics came the vision of creation as a descending ladder of divine emanations, a sacred structure linking the infinite to the finite. And through the mystery schools, all of these currents met and mingled, each civilization contributing a single precious piece to a shared and shining vision of the cosmos. Imagine these traditions not as isolated islands but as many voices singing, in different tongues, the same underlying song. Though separated by mountains and oceans, by centuries and languages, they seem to arrive again and again at a common intuition, that the universe is intelligent, that it is ordered by hidden laws, and that the human being is not a stranger cast adrift within it, but a child of the cosmos, woven from the very same principles that govern the stars. This was a world in which science and spirit and art were not divided into separate rooms, walled off from one another, but flowed together as one continuous stream of understanding. The astronomer was also a priest. The mathematician was also a mystic. The artist who carved a temple was also a theologian, encoding sacred truth in stone and proportion. This is the forgotten world that so profoundly shaped manly P.Hall. When he read the ancient texts, when he studied the symbols and the myths and the geometries left behind by these vanished cultures, he did not see a collection of quaint superstitions to be smiled at and set aside. He saw the surviving fragments of a unified vision of reality, a landscape of meaning so rich, so coherent, so alive, that it seemed to speak directly to something starved within the modern soul. He came to believe that these ancient peoples were not primitive at all, but were in some ways wiser than we, precisely because they had never severed the bonds between knowledge and wonder, between fact and meaning, between the outer world and the inner life. Yet this luminous world, for all its beauty and depth, did not endure. Slowly, tragically, its light began to fade from human memory, dimming century by century until at last we forgot that it had ever shone at all. How does a world so vast, so luminous, simply vanish? It does not happen all at once. There is no single moment we can point to and say, here is where the great forgetting began. Instead, it unfolds the way a fire dies in an abandoned hearth, slowly, quietly, one ember at a time, until the room that once glowed with warmth grows cold and dark, and no one remembers what it was like to sit within its light. This is how the ancient wisdom faded from the world, not through one catastrophe, but through 1,000 small losses, each seeming minor in its moment, yet together amounting to the disappearance of an entire way of seeing reality. Consider the great libraries, those sacred repositories where the accumulated understanding of civilizations was gathered and preserved. When the Library of Alexandria burned, humanity did not merely lose scrolls and parchments. It lost the living memory of centuries, the mathematical insights, the astronomical observations, the philosophical dialogues, the medical knowledge, the sacred sciences that generations of scholars had labored to record. And Alexandria was only the most famous of these wounds. Across the ancient world, temples were demolished, archives were scattered, and the patient work of 1,000 years was reduced to ash and rumor. Each destruction severed another thread connecting us to the minds that had first glimpsed the hidden order of things. Then came the closing of the mystery schools. For millennia, these institutions had served as guardians of the deepest teachings, places where initiates were carefully prepared to receive knowledge too profound and too potent to be handed carelessly to the unprepared. But as empires shifted and new powers rose, these schools were declared dangerous, subversive, forbidden. Their doors were locked, their teachers silenced or scattered, their lineages of transmission broken. And when a living tradition is broken, when the chain from master to student is severed, something irreplaceable is lost. Books can preserve words, but they cannot preserve the living understanding that passed, breath to breath, from one awakened soul to another. That understanding simply vanished, like a melody no one remembered how to play. As the centuries turned, the sacred sciences themselves began to be misunderstood. Astrology, which had once been a profound meditation on the correspondence between the heavens and the human soul, became reduced to fortune-telling. Alchemy, which had been a sublime symbolic language for the transformation of consciousness, was mistaken for a crude attempt to turn lead into literal gold. The old sciences were not disproven, they were misread, flattened, drained of their inner meaning, until only their outer shell remained. And future generations, encountering these hollow shells, quite naturally dismissed them as the foolish errors of a superstitious past. This brings us to perhaps the most subtle and devastating loss of all, the death of symbolic thinking. The ancients spoke in symbols not because they were incapable of clearer speech, but because symbols could hold layers of meaning that plain words could not. A symbol was a doorway, opening inward to depths of understanding that revealed themselves gradually, as the seeker grew ready to perceive them. But as the ages passed, humanity began to lose this capacity. We forgot how to read the language of symbols. We began to take literally what had been meant symbolically, mistaking the finger for the moon it pointed toward. Sacred myths that had once been vessels of profound psychological and spiritual truth were now read as either literal history or childish fable, and in both readings, their true meaning was lost. The philosophical traditions that had once formed a coherent vision of reality fragmented into scattered pieces, and no one remembered how the pieces fit together. And so, by degrees, the great vision dissolved. What remained were only scattered clues, fragments of a shattered mirror lying in the dust of centuries, a geometric pattern carved into a temple wall, a symbol repeated across cultures that had never met, a ruin whose proportions still whispered of forgotten harmonies, an ancient manuscript half decayed, its meaning obscure, a myth passed down through generations, its origins forgotten, a ritual performed by rote, its inner significance long lost. These fragments survived, scattered across the world like the pieces of a mirror smashed upon the ground, and though each piece still held a glimmer of the original light, no single fragment could reveal the whole. Only someone willing to gather them all patiently, reverently, across a lifetime might begin to reassemble that shattered mirror and glimpse once more the unified reflection it had once contained. This is the labor to which manly P.Hall would devote his entire life. But now we must name the true antagonist of this story, for every meaningful journey requires an obstacle, a force that resists, a darkness against which the light must struggle. And here we encounter something unexpected. The antagonist in Hall's philosophy is not a villain in any ordinary sense. There is no evil sorcerer, no tyrannical emperor, no single figure upon whom we can lay the blame. The antagonist is something far more pervasive and far more difficult to defeat because it lives within each of us. The true antagonist is humanity's forgetfulness. It is our collective amnesia, our capacity to let the deepest truths slip from memory until we no longer even know what we have lost. The true antagonist is materialism without spirit, a way of seeing the world that acknowledges only what can be measured, weighed, and touched, while dismissing the invisible dimensions of meaning and consciousness as mere illusion. The true antagonist is the loss of symbolic thinking, that impoverishment of the imagination that leaves us unable to perceive the deeper resonances hidden within the surface of things. It is the misinterpretation of ancient teachings, the tendency to flatten what is profound and to mistake the shell for the seed. And perhaps most powerfully of all, the antagonist is fear, the fear of questioning accepted beliefs, the fear of stepping beyond the comfortable boundaries of what we have been told, the fear of confronting the vast and mysterious possibility that reality is far deeper than we have allowed ourselves to imagine. At its heart, then, the conflict of this entire story can be understood as a struggle between two ways of being. On one side stands visible reality, the world of surfaces, of appearances, of things we can see and count and control. On the other side stands invisible truth, the world of meaning, of principle, of the hidden intelligence that the ancients believed underlies all existence. And deeper still, beneath even this, lies the most essential conflict of all, the struggle between knowledge and unconscious living, between a soul that is awake to the deeper currents of existence and a soul that sleeps, drifting through life without ever wondering what lies beneath its surface. This is the war that Hall believed each of us is silently fighting, whether we know it or not. And here, at last, we arrive at the resolution of that haunting paradox we encountered at the very beginning. Why, if the universe truly operates according to hidden laws, are we never taught them? Why do these principles remain so obscure, so easily dismissed, so absent from our schools and our daily lives? The answer, Hall suggests, is both simpler and stranger than we might expect. The laws were never truly hidden from us. They were never locked away in some inaccessible vault. They surround us always, written into the patterns of nature, the structures of mathematics, the movements of the stars, the very architecture of our own minds. What happened was not that the universe concealed its secrets, it is that we grew blind. We lost the eyes to see. We severed the bonds between knowledge and wonder, and in doing so, we mistook mere information for wisdom, mistook the accumulation of facts for genuine understanding. The great forgetting was not a theft committed against us. It was a slow closing of our own inner sight. It was against this darkness, this collective blindness, this sleep of the soul that manly P.Hall labored throughout his long life. And what he uncovered in that patient work of reassembling the shattered mirror forms the very heart of his philosophy, the luminous principles we are about to explore together. The first principle Hall returns to again and again, the one that stands like a doorway before all the others, is the principle of correspondence. It is captured in a phrase that echoes down from the emerald tablet of Hermes Trismegistus, ancient beyond reliable dating, as above so below, as below so above. On the surface, these words seem simple, almost poetic, but sit with them and they begin to open like a flower. They suggest that reality is not divided into separate, unrelated compartments, but woven through with a repeating pattern that whatever is true on the highest plane of existence is mirrored, in its own scale, on every plane beneath it. The spiral of a distant galaxy echoes the spiral of a seashell. The orbit of a planet echoes the orbit of an electron. The structure of the heavens is reflected in the structure of the human soul. To understand one level of reality, Hall taught, is to hold a key to all of them. From this single principle flows a way of seeing that transforms everything. If the universe is built upon correspondence, then nothing is truly isolated. Every fragment contains a reflection of the whole. And this leads us naturally to the second great law, the law of cause and effect. Hall did not speak of this merely as the mechanical chain of physics, one billiard ball striking another. He spoke of it as a moral and spiritual reality that penetrates every dimension of life. Nothing arises without a cause. No thought, no action, no ripple of intention passes without consequence. What we send outward returns to us, transformed along threads we cannot always trace. The ancients called this by many names karma, retribution, divine justice, but beneath the names lies a single conviction. The universe is not indifferent to what we do. It responds, it remembers, it answers. And where cause and effect governs the movement of things, universal harmony governs their relationship to one another. Hall saw the cosmos not as a chaos accidentally settled into order, but as a vast composition of music playing at frequencies too subtle for ordinary ears. The Pythagoreans spoke of the harmony of the spheres, the idea that the heavenly bodies in their courses produced tones, a celestial symphony sounding eternally around us. This was never meant as mere fancy. It was a way of saying that everything which exists is bound together by proportion, by ratio, by rhythm. Discord in one part sends tremors through the whole, and the wise soul, Hall believed, is the one who learns to tune itself to that greater music, to live in resonance rather than resistance with the deep order of things. That order reveals itself most vividly in sacred geometry. Long before geometry became a subject scrawled on classroom blackboards, it was regarded as a sacred science, a glimpse into the very language with which the cosmos was written. The circle, the triangle, the pentagram, the golden ratio unfolding through the growth of leaves and shells and the proportions of the human body, these were seen as thoughts of the divine made visible. When ancient builders raised their temples, they encoded these proportions into stone so that the structure itself would resonate with cosmic order, a frozen music, a prayer in mathematics. To study sacred geometry was not to study lifeless shapes, but to trace the fingerprints of a creating intelligence. For behind the geometry, behind the harmony, behind the very laws themselves, Hall placed the divine mind, the idea that the universe is not merely a machine but a living intelligence, a single vast consciousness within which all things arise and move and have their being. This was the Hermetic vision at its most radiant, the cosmos as one great mind, thinking itself into form. And if that is so, then the relationship between the human being and the whole takes on a staggering significance. This is where the microcosm and the macrocosm meet. Hall taught that the human being is a universe in miniature, that within each of us the same forces, the same structures, the same divine spark that animates the stars is present in concentrated form. We are not spectators standing outside creation, peering in. We are creation, folded inward, looking back at itself through our own eyes. From this recognition, a map of transformation unfolds in here. Hall's philosophy turns from cosmology to the intimate journey of the soul. He spoke of spiritual evolution, the slow ascent of consciousness across states of awareness, perhaps across lifetimes, as the inner being awakens gradually to its own nature. This is not the evolution of bodies alone, but of understanding, of compassion, of the capacity to perceive. And the vehicle for this ascent throughout the ancient world was symbolic language. The myths, the sacred images, the ritual dramas were never meant to be swallowed as literal history. They were symbols vessels designed to carry meaning that plain speech could not hold, keys crafted to unlock the deeper chambers of the mind. To read a symbol rightly is to awaken something within oneself that mere description can never touch. This is why the ancient world guarded the process of initiation. In the mystery schools, wisdom was not lectured but experienced, passed through carefully staged ordeals and revelations meant to transform the seeker from within. One did not simply learn the mysteries, one became worthy of them, was reshaped by them. And all of this, the evolution, the symbols, the initiation describes what Hall called the soul's journey, the long pilgrimage of consciousness descending into matter, forgetting its origin, wandering through the world of appearances, and then, slowly, painfully, gloriously, remembering turning back toward the source from which it came. This is the hidden story beneath every hero's myth, every tale of exile and return, every legend of the light that must pass through darkness to know itself. And here, at the summit, all these threads gather into one. For the final and greatest principle is the unity of all existence. Correspondence, cause and effect, harmony, geometry, the divine mind, microcosm and macrocosm, evolution, symbol, initiation. The journey of the soul. Hall insisted these are not separate doctrines competing for our belief. They are facets of a single jewel, expressions of one underlying philosophy, each describing from a different angle how consciousness, nature, and the cosmos flow together as one living whole. Pull on any thread and you find it connected to all the rest. Understand any one principle deeply enough, and it opens onto every other. And this is the turning point, the pivot, upon which everything we have said now rests. These hidden laws are not mystical superstitions, not the fearful fancies of primitive minds groping in the dark. They are something far more remarkable. They are symbolic frameworks for understanding reality itself, instruments carefully forged to help the mind perceive the order that lies beneath the shifting surface of appearances. Where the modern eye sees only isolated facts scattered across a meaningless void, these principles offer a way to see the pattern, the coherence, the deep intelligence woven through it all. They do not ask us to abandon reason. They ask us to extend it or reach past the visible into the structures that give the visible its form. To grasp this is to feel the whole picture shift beneath you. What seemed like ancient poetry reveals itself as a sophisticated map of reality, drawn by minds that studied existence with a patience and depth we have very nearly forgotten. If these principles are truly so fundamental, then their influence should still echo through our modern world, and indeed it does. Consider a quiet clinic in Zurich in the early 20th century, where a physician sat listening to the dreams of his patients. Carl Jung had trained in the strict discipline of medical science, yet the more deeply he listened, the more he encountered something that science alone could not explain. His patients, men and women who had never studied mythology, never opened an ancient manuscript, never sat in a temple, were dreaming in symbols. They dreamed of serpents encircling themselves, of sacred marriages, of descents into darkness and returns into light, of divine children and wise old men. And these images were not random. They mirrored with uncanny precision the very symbols carved into the walls of Egyptian tombs, painted in the mysteries of alchemy, and whispered in the initiation halls of the ancient world. Jung could not ignore what he was seeing. He began to speak of archetypes, primordial patterns that seemed to live within the human psyche itself, shaping our dreams, our myths, and our deepest longings. He described a collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of symbolic meaning that connects every human mind across time and culture. And in doing so, he was walking, perhaps without fully realizing it, along a path the mystery schools had walked millennia before him. For what were the ancient symbols, if not archetypes? What was the Hermetic vision of one living mind, if not an early intuition of that shared inner world? Jung himself turned to alchemy, to Gnostic texts, to the old symbolic traditions, sensing that these forgotten sages had mapped the same interior landscape he was rediscovering through the language of psychology. This is the first great echo. Modern psychology, in its most profound moments, did not invent a new understanding of the soul. It remembered an old one. The idea that the outer symbol reflects an inner truth, that the pattern in the myth mirrors the pattern in the mind. This is the principle of correspondence, quietly returning in scientific clothing. As above, so below became, as within, so without. And so the ancient teaching survived, not in a temple, but in the consulting room, in the study of dreams, in the slow and patient work of helping a person become whole. Yet psychology is only one channel through which this ancient current still flows. Turn to the field of comparative religion, and you find scholars discovering that the world's great spiritual traditions, however different on the surface, echo one another at their depths. The same symbols appear again and again: the tree of life, the cosmic mountain, the divine word that brings order out of chaos, the journey of the soul toward union with the source. It is as though humanity, in every land and every age, has been reaching toward a single truth through 1,000 different languages. This is precisely what the old philosophers believed, that beneath the many faces of religion lies one perennial wisdom, one universal philosophy expressed through countless symbols. And look at the very buildings in which we gather to worship and to wonder. Sacred architecture still carries the fingerprints of these hidden laws. The great cathedrals were raised according to proportions their builders considered holy ratios drawn from geometry, from harmony, from the belief that a structure aligned with cosmic order could lift the human spirit toward the divine. The golden proportion, the sacred measures, the deliberate play of light through stone thieves were not decoration. They were an attempt to embody universal harmony in matter, to make the invisible order visible, to build a place where the microcosm of the worshipper could meet the macrocosm of the cosmos. Even today, when we step into such a space and feel our breath grow still, we are responding to a language of proportion the ancients spoke fluently. The echo does not stop at the doors of the temple. It has entered the most personal corners of modern life. Consider the vast movement of personal development, the countless voices urging us to align our thoughts, to understand cause and effect in our own choices, to recognize that the inner life shapes the outer circumstance. Strip away the modern packaging, and what remains is the law of cause and effect, the principle of correspondence, the ancient conviction that a human being is not a helpless leaf in the wind but a participant in a lawful universe. Consider meditation, now practiced by millions who may never have heard of a mystery school, yet who sit in silence seeking the same inner stillness the initiates sought: the turning of attention inward, the descent beneath the noise of the senses toward a deeper ground of being. Consider the growing field of consciousness studies, where scientists and philosophers now ask, with genuine seriousness, whether mind is truly a mere byproduct of matter, or whether consciousness reaches deeper into the fabric of reality than we once dared to believe. Here the ancient vision of the divine mind stirs again, no longer dismissed as superstition but explored as a legitimate question. Consider systems thinking, that modern discipline which teaches us to see the world not as isolated parts but as interconnected wholes, where every element shapes and is shaped by the rest. Is this not the ancient teaching of the unity of all existence, returning in the language of networks and feedback loops? The mystic said all things are one. The systems thinker says all things are connected. They are describing the same truth from two directions, and across the wide and restless landscape of modern spirituality, we find the same longing that once animated the mystery school: the hunger to belong to something vast, to sense that life carries a deeper design, to feel that we are woven into a pattern larger than ourselves. The names have changed, the rituals have changed, but the seeker is the same. The one who lights a candle in a quiet room, who searches ancient texts for meaning, who suspects that the universe is speaking and strains to understand its language. That seeker is a direct descendant of the priest studying cosmic harmony, of the philosopher pursuing universal truth, of the student kneeling at the threshold of initiation. So we arrive at a question that is almost unsettling in its implications. Could these ancient principles still quietly shape the way we think, the way we create, the way we understand the universe today, even when we no longer speak their names, even when we imagine ourselves entirely modern, entirely rational, entirely free of the old superstitions? When a physicist marvels at the mathematical elegance of the cosmos, when a psychologist maps the symbols of the soul, when an ordinary person pauses beneath the stars and feels an inexplicable sense of belonging, are they not, in their own way, touching the very laws manly P.Hall spent his life trying to preserve? Perhaps the truth is that this wisdom never truly left us. It changed its clothing. It slipped into our science, our art, our psychology, our quiet moments of longing. It hid in plain sight, waiting for anyone with eyes patient enough to recognize it. The same fire that burned in the ancient temples still flickers in every modern heart that asks whether life holds a deeper design, whether there is, beneath all our striving, a pattern worth understanding. And yet, if this knowledge is so vital, so enduring, so deeply woven into the human spirit, that it survives even our forgetting, then we are left facing the deepest question of all. Why did it ever become hidden in the first place? Why was wisdom, this precious, buried beneath centuries of silence, veiled in symbol, guarded behind locked doors? To answer that, we must look closely at how such knowledge is lost and at what the ancients themselves believed about who deserves to receive it. The first reason is perhaps the most misunderstood of all, and it begins with the nature of the language itself. The ancients did not write in the plain, literal prose we rely on today. They spoke in symbols. A serpent was never merely a serpent. A sun was never merely the sun. A temple built of stone was also a map of the soul, and a myth about gods was also a diagram of forces alive within the human heart. This symbolic language was not a decoration, not a poetic flourish laid over simple truths. It was itself the vessel of the teaching, and a vessel like that cannot be opened by casual reading. It requires interpretations low, careful, contemplative interpretation, the kind that unfolds only when the mind has been trained to see through the surface into the meaning beneath. Manly P.Hall understood this deeply. He knew that a symbol reveals itself only to the prepared mind and conceals itself from the unprepared one, not out of cruelty but out of the very structure of how meaning works. Tell a child a profound truth in plain words and the words pass through them untouched. But wrap that truth in an image, a story, a shape that must be pondered, and something remarkable happens. The seeker must labor toward the meaning, and in that labor the meaning takes root. The ancients understood that a truth simply handed over is a truth quickly forgotten, while a truth earned is a truth that transforms. The symbol, then, was never a wall meant to keep people out. It was a threshold designed so that only those willing to grow could cross it. This leads us to the second reason, one that runs even deeper into the philosophy of the mystery schools. The ancient teachers believed, with quiet conviction, that wisdom must be earned rather than simply given. To us, raised in an age of instant answers, this can sound almost harsh. Why hide anything? Why not share every insight freely, openly with all who ask? But the old masters saw something we have largely forgotten. They understood that knowledge and wisdom are not the same thing. Knowledge can be transferred in a sentence. Wisdom cannot. Wisdom is the fruit of experience, of struggle, of inner transformation. It ripens slowly through discipline and reflection and the gradual refinement of the soul. To hand a great teaching to someone who is not prepared to receive it is not generosity at all. It is like pouring living water into a broken vessel, watching the precious thing drain away into nothing. And so the mystery schools built their long stairways of initiation. The seeker did not arrive at the highest truths on the first day. He was tested, purified, made to prove not his cleverness but his character. Each stage of the journey shaped the student to become worthy of what came next. The secrecy was never meant to create an elite few who hoarded power over the many. It was meant to protect the sacred flame from hands that were not yet steady enough to carry it without being burned. Which brings us to the third reason, sober and undeniable. The ancients knew that powerful knowledge, misused, could cause profound harm to others, and harm to the one who wields it. Understanding the hidden laws of the universe is not a neutral thing. To grasp how mind shapes matter, how attention shapes reality, how the inner world echoes into the outer this is a form of power. And power placed in the hands of one still ruled by fear, greed, or vanity does not heal, it wounds. The veiling of wisdom, then, was an act of protection running in two directions at once. It protected the world from the unprepared student, and it protected the unprepared student from a burden too heavy for the soul to bear. The lock upon the door was, in its own strange way, an expression of compassion. Yet not all concealment was so noble, and honesty demands that we acknowledge this. For across the long centuries, religious and political systems learned that whoever controls knowledge controls people. Access to education became a privilege, granted to some and denied to others. Sacred texts were kept in languages the common person could not read. Interpretation became the guarded possession of a chosen class. And so wisdom that might have belonged to all humanity was fenced behind institutions, sometimes to preserve it, but sometimes simply to preserve power over those kept in the dark. The hidden laws became hidden not only by the nature of symbols and the discipline of initiation, but also by the deliberate walls of those who feared what free minds might do with such understanding. And in our own age, the veil has taken on yet another form, perhaps the most subtle and dangerous of all. We live now in a world drowning in information. Never before has so much knowledge been so freely, instantly available. And yet, paradoxically, wisdom feels farther away than ever. For we have made a quiet, disastrous substitution. We have mistaken information for understanding. We collect facts as though facts alone could nourish the soul. We scroll and skim and consume, gathering data by the endless megabyte, while the slow, patient art of contemplation withers within us. The ancients feared that wisdom might be lost through secrecy. We are losing it through noise. The teachings are no longer locked away in hidden temples. They are lost in the overwhelming flood of everything, scattered like stars invisible beneath the glare of 1,000 city lights. And here at last we arrive at the resolution of the paradox with which our journey began. We asked, at the very start, why, if the universe truly runs upon hidden laws that shape every human life, we were never taught them in school. We wondered whether the greatest mystery was not whether hidden laws exist, but whether we had spent our entire lives ignoring them. And now the answer stands before us, quiet and luminous. The hidden laws of the universe may never have been truly secret at all. They were never locked away in some vault beyond human reach. Humanity simply lost the ability to recognize them. The correspondence between the inner and the outer, the law of cause and effect, the harmony woven through number and star and season, the single mind expressing itself through all of creation, none of these were ever hidden in the way we imagined. They were written across the face of the world in letters so vast we forgot how to read them. They shone in every dawn, echoed in every heartbeat, whispered in every moment of stillness. The secrecy was never a curtain drawn to conceal. It was a threshold, standing open, waiting. This is the reframing that changes everything. To call this knowledge hidden is to misunderstand the nature of the veil. Nothing was ever taken from us. The wisdom stands in plain sight, exactly where it has always stood, awaiting only those who develop the inner sight to perceive it. The mystery was never in the object to be seen, but in the eye that must learn to see. The temple was never truly locked. The key was never truly lost. What was lost was the seeker's own readiness, the patience to look slowly, the humility to be transformed, the willingness to become the kind of soul before whom the veil grows thin and finally falls away. The universe never hid its laws from us. We simply forgot how to look, and so we arrive at the enduring legacy of manly P.Hall, the single lesson that outlasts all the others. That single lesson does not arrive as a thunderclap. It arrives quietly, the way dawn arrives, first as a faint gray light at the edge of things, then as a slow, spreading warmth that reveals a landscape which had been there all along. And when you finally see it, you realize the truth was never far away. It was woven into the fabric of everything you have ever touched. Consider how these universal principles still surround us, even now, even here, in a world that believes it has outgrown mystery. Look at mathematics, and you will find the same harmonies the ancients revered, ratios and sequences that repeat across nature with an elegance no accident could explain. The spiral of a galaxy and the spiral of a seashell obey the same silent proportion. Look to astronomy, and the heavens still move in the ordered dance that first taught humanity the meaning of cosmos, a Greek word that means not chaos but beautiful order. The stars have not changed their teaching, only we stopped listening. Walk into any great cathedral, any ancient temple, any sacred structure raised by hands that understood proportion as prayer, and you will feel it before you can name it. The architecture speaks a language older than words. Its arches and columns, its light falling through carefully placed windows, its geometry echoing the geometry of the sky, all of it was designed to remind the soul of something it had forgotten. Sacred architecture was never merely shelter. It was a diagram of the heavens rendered in stone, a place where the human being could stand at the meeting point of earth and infinity. The same principles breathe within our religious traditions, hidden beneath the surface of story and ritual. Beneath every mythology lies a pattern, the hero who descends into darkness and returns transformed, the death that precedes rebirth, the light that emerges from the void. These are not merely old tales. They are the soul's own journey, told in symbols so that each generation might recognize its own passage through them. Mythology was humanity's first psychology, mapping the inner world long before we had the language to describe it. And this is where the ancient wisdom reaches quietly into the modern mind. In psychology, we speak now of archetypes, of the unconscious, of the symbols that rise unbidden in our dreams. In art, we still search for the proportions that stir something deep within us, the balance that feels somehow true. In music, we hear the mathematics of harmony translated into emotion, vibrations arranged so precisely that they can move us to tears without a single word. And in the natural patterns all around us, in the branching of trees and rivers, in the structure of a crystal, in the rhythm of tides and seasons, the same intelligence writes its signature again and again. Everywhere you turn, the hidden laws are not hidden at all. They are singing softly in every corner of existence, waiting for the ear that has learned to hear. And at the center of all of it, gathering every thread into one, stands the most extraordinary mystery of all, human consciousness itself. The very awareness with which you perceive these patterns is itself an expression of them. You are not standing outside the cosmos, observing its laws from a distance. You are the cosmos, folded inward, become aware of itself. And here at last we reach the single lesson that outlasts all the others. The greatest gift manly P.Hall offers us is not the revelation that hidden laws govern the universe. It is something far more intimate, far more transforming. It is the understanding that we cannot truly know the universe without coming to know ourselves, that these two journeys, which seem to lead in opposite directions, are in truth the same journey walked from two ends. For the deeper we explore reality, the further we press into the nature of matter, of energy, of order and meaning, the more we discover that the universe reflects the very same principles alive within us. The proportion that shapes a galaxy shapes the growth of a thought. The rhythm that moves the tides moves the breath in our own chest. The intelligence we search for among the stars turns out to be gazing back at us from within. The seeker and the sought are one. The one who searches for the mystery is himself the mystery he has been searching for. This is why Hall dedicated his life not to accumulating facts but to awakening perception. He understood that wisdom is not something added to us from outside, like coins dropped into a purse. It is something remembered, something uncovered, something that rises when the soul grows quiet enough to recognize its own reflection in the great mirror of creation. To study the heavens is to study yourself. To understand the laws of the cosmos is to understand the laws already written in the depths of your own being. There was never a separation, there was only the illusion of distance. And so the veil that seemed to conceal the mysteries of the universe turns out to be nothing more than the veil that conceals us from ourselves. When it falls, both are revealed at once. To awaken to the universe is to awaken to your own nature. To understand yourself completely is to hold, in the palm of a single moment of insight, the entire pattern of the stars. Which leaves us, at the end of this long journey, with a question that no video, no book, no teacher can answer for you. It is a question you must carry into the silence of your own reflection. Do the hidden laws described by manly P.Hall reveal timeless truths woven into the very foundation of the universe, principles that existed long before us and will endure long after? Or are they symbolic philosophies, beautiful frameworks created by the human mind to help us understand ourselves and give meaning to our brief passage through existence? Perhaps the answer is not one or the other. Perhaps, in the deepest sense, both are true at once, and that paradox is itself the final teaching. I would love to know where your own heart lands. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us continue this conversation together, seeker to seeker, across whatever distance separates us. Because the journey ends here, but only for now. What we have explored together is not a conclusion, it is an opening. The deeper exploration of the self and the cosmos has in truth only just begun. The temple stands open before you, and the light within it is waiting. All that remains is for you to step across the threshold and begin to see with new eyes. And as you stand at that threshold, remember that everything we have traced together, the sacred geometry hidden in a flower, the harmony of numbers echoing through music, the ancient symbols carved into forgotten temples, the quiet wisdom sleeping within your own consciousness, was never truly far away. It has been surrounding you all along, waiting patiently in the mathematics of the stars, in the rhythms of nature, in the myths that still whisper to us across the centuries. The hidden laws were never locked in some distant vault of the past. They live in every sunrise, every heartbeat, every moment you pause long enough to truly notice. So carry this feeling with you, this gentle sense of wonder, long after these words have faded into silence. Look at the world a little more slowly. Listen a little more deeply. For in learning to see the universe with new eyes, you may finally begin to recognize the same eternal principles quietly shining within yourself, the seeker and the sought forever one.